Rich orc woman gave a bag of gold to a poor human. What he did next left her in shock. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. Moments where a single choice, made carelessly, made in anger, made without thinking, changes absolutely everything. This is a story about one of those moments. About a bag of gold thrown in contempt. About a beggar who refused to stay broken. And about an orc woman who learned that the most dangerous thing you can give someone isn't your money. It's your faith. Lady Scarla Goldtusk had the kind of wealth that made problems disappear. She owned half the trading district in Greyfang City, controlled shipping routes that stretched across 3 kingdoms, and had enough gold in her vaults to buy a small army. But money, as she'd learned over 37 years of brutal business dealings, couldn't buy the one thing she wanted most: respect from her own people. The problem wasn't that she was a woman. Orc culture respected strength regardless of gender. The problem was that she'd made her fortune trading with humans, buying their goods, selling them orc-crafted weapons and armor, building bridges between 2 species that were supposed to hate each other. And for that, the traditional orc nobility considered her a traitor wrapped in expensive silk. The morning everything changed started like any other morning in Greyfang City. Cold, gray, the kind of morning where even the sun seemed reluctant to show up for work. Scarla stood on the steps of her trading hall, a massive stone building that had once been a war fortress and still looked like it could withstand a siege, reviewing contracts with her assistant when she heard the laughter. War Chief Hoktar Ironbrow stood at the base of her steps with 6 other traditional nobles, all of them looking up at her with the kind of contempt usually reserved for week-old meat. Her uncle, the man who'd once told her father that letting a daughter run a business was like letting a wolf guard sheep. Technically possible, but inevitably messy. Well, Hoktar called up, his voice carrying that particular edge of someone who'd been drinking since dawn. If it isn't Lady Goldtusk, tell me, niece, have you counted your human coins today? Made sure none of them betrayed you in the night? The other nobles laughed. That ugly pack-hunting kind of laughter that meant trouble. Scarla had heard worse. She'd built her fortune on hearing worse and not flinching. But something about today, maybe the cold, maybe her mood, maybe the fact that she'd woken up alone in a mansion full of servants and felt the weight of that loneliness like stones on her chest, made her patience thinner than usual. "My coins don't betray me, uncle," she said, her voice carrying that dangerous calm that usually preceded violence. Because coins, unlike family, are honest about what they are. That landed. She saw it in the way Hoktar's jaw tightened, the way his hand moved toward his axe before remembering where he was. You didn't start fights on Goldtusk property. Not unless you wanted to end up in one of Scarla's debt cells, which were considerably less comfortable than her guest rooms. Honest, Hoktar repeated, tasting the word like poison. You want to talk about honesty? Then let's talk about how you've never once given charity to your own kind. How you hoard your gold like a dragon while orc families starve in the lower districts. But I'm sure you'd throw coins at humans, wouldn't you? I'm sure you'd help them before you'd help your own blood. Scarla opened her mouth to respond with something cutting and dignified when she saw him. The human. He sat at the base of her steps, almost invisible in the shadow of the building. Thin to the point of skeletal, dressed in rags that might have been brown once but were now mostly the color of streets and despair. He wasn't begging, wasn't asking for anything. Just sitting there, existing in a way that suggested existing was about all he had energy for. And he was looking at her, not with the desperate pleading of professional beggars, not with the hatred she sometimes saw from humans who blamed all orcs for their problems. He was looking at her with curiosity, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve, like even starving and broken, some part of him was still thinking, still analyzing, still alive in ways that mattered more than breathing. Something about that look did something to Scarla's chest. Something uncomfortable and familiar and forgotten. "You want proof I'd help humans?" Scarla heard herself say, the words coming out before her brain approved them. Fine. She reached into the leather pouch at her belt. Not her main coin purse, the emergency fund she kept for bribes and unexpected expenses, and pulled out the entire bag. It was heavy, roughly 500 gold pieces. Enough to buy a house. Enough to live comfortably for 5 years if you were careful. Enough to change a life. She threw it. The bag sailed through the air in a perfect arc, spinning slightly, catching the weak morning light. It landed in the human's lap with a heavy thunk that echoed off the stone steps. The silence that followed had weight, had texture, had the quality of something that would be talked about for years. The human looked down at the bag in his lap, then up at Scarla, then back down at the bag, his hands, scarred, calloused, shaking slightly from what might have been cold or hunger or disbelief, opened the drawstring. Gold glinted. "There," Scarla said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "Proof that I'm exactly as foolish as you think I am, Uncle. Happy?" Akhtar wasn't laughing anymore. None of them were. They were staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust to something that might have been fear, because what she'd just done wasn't generosity. It was chaos. It was a rich orc woman throwing a fortune at a human beggar in front of witnesses. It was the kind of story that would spread through Greyfang City like wildfire through dry grass. The human stood, slowly, like someone who wasn't sure their legs would support them. He looked at Scarla for a long moment, that same curious, analyzing look, and then he did something that surprised her more than anything else that morning. He smiled, not a grateful smile, not a subservient smile, a smile that said he understood something she didn't, a smile that made her feel, for just a moment, like she'd done something more interesting than she'd intended. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough, unused, but there was something in it, something that sounded like it meant more than the word suggested. "I'll remember this." Then he turned and walked away, not running, not scrambling, walking with his back straight and his head up, the bag of gold clutched against his chest like it contained something more valuable than money. Scarla watched him disappear into the morning crowd, and felt, for reasons she couldn't explain, like she'd just done something that couldn't be undone. "Well," Akhtar said after a long pause, his voice dripping with satisfaction, "that's 500 gold you'll never see again. I hope proving your point was worth it, niece. I'm sure he'll spend every coin on wine and dice before the week is out." Scarla didn't respond. She was still watching the spot where the human had disappeared, wondering why she felt like she'd just started something important. 3 months passed. 3 months of Scarla going about her business, making deals, expanding her trading empire, attending council meetings where traditional nobles glared at her and newly wealthy merchants tried to curry her favor. 3 months of waking up alone, eating alone, working alone, and telling herself that solitude was strength. 3 months of trying not to think about a human beggar with curious eyes. She failed at that last part more often than she cared to admit. The rumors started in the second month, whispers in the market, stories told by traders coming in from the lower districts, something about a human doing something unusual in the poorest part of the city, building something, creating something. Nobody could quite agree on what exactly, but they all agreed it was strange. Scarla told herself she didn't care. The beggar was probably dead in a ditch somewhere, the gold stolen or spent. The rumors were about someone else, some other human with ambitions larger than their means. She told herself that right up until the morning he appeared in her office. Her assistant burst through the door with the kind of panic usually reserved for fires or assassinations. "Lady Scarla, there's a human here to see you. He says you'll remember him." Scarla looked up from her contracts, already annoyed. "Tell him I don't—" But she stopped, because the human who walked through her door wasn't a beggar anymore. He was clean, bathed, dressed in simple but well-made clothes, workers' garments, practical, showing signs of actual use but not poverty. His hair was cut. His beard was trimmed. He'd gained weight, filled out in a way that suggested regular meals and physical labor, but it was his eyes that stopped her mid-sentence. They still had that curious look, but now there was confidence behind it. Purpose. The look of someone who'd figured out the puzzle. "Lady Goldtusk," he said, and his voice was stronger now, clearer. "My name is Weston Fletcher. We met 3 months ago. You gave me something. I'm here to give you something in return." Scarla felt her quills, the decorative bone piercings that ran along her ears, marks of her status, rattle slightly. She forced her expression to remain neutral, cool, professional. "I don't recall asking for anything in return." "You didn't." Weston stepped further into the office, and she noticed he wasn't nervous, wasn't intimidated by the orc guards at her door, or the weapons on her walls, or her reputation for eating business partners who disappointed her. "But I'm offering anyway. A business proposition." That got her attention. Not charity returned. Not gratitude. Business. "I'm listening," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. A chair designed for orcs, which meant it was comically large for a human, but Weston sat in it without apparent embarrassment. "The gold you gave me," he began, pulling out a leather folio from his bag. Actual documents, she noted, professionally prepared. "I didn't spend it on wine or dice or any of the other things people assumed I would. I spent it on wood, tools, rent for a building, and employment. He spread the documents across her desk, contracts, ledgers, profit and loss statements written in surprisingly neat handwriting. I opened a carpentry workshop, Weston continued, in the lower districts where rent is cheap and workers are desperate. But here's the interesting part. I employ both humans and orcs, the ones nobody else will hire, the ones considered too broken, too poor, too problematic, and we make furniture. Scarla picked up one of the ledgers, scanning it. The numbers were small but real. Profit, not much, but growth trending upward. Expenses carefully managed. A business that was actually functioning. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, though part of her already knew. "Because I want to expand," Weston said. "I have the model. I have the workers. I have proof the concept works. What I need is capital and connections. I need someone who can open doors that stay closed for people like me. I need a partner." The word hung in the air between them. Partner. Not patron. Not charity giver. Partner. "You want me to invest in a carpentry workshop in the slums?" Scarla said slowly. "Staffed by human and orc workers that nobody else wants. That's your proposition." "Yes." "That's insane." "Yes. No wealthy orc will buy furniture made by human hands, and no wealthy human will buy furniture touched by orc ones." "I know," Weston said. "That's why we don't sell to wealthy people. We sell to everyone else, to the traders who need sturdy carts, to the innkeepers who need tables and chairs, to the farmers who need barn doors and tool handles. There are 100 poor people for every rich one, Lady Goldtusk, and they all need furniture." Scarla studied him, this human who'd taken her impulsive act of pride and turned it into something systematic, something thought through, something that made a disturbing amount of sense. "Why a mixed workforce?" she asked. "You could have hired only humans, made things simpler." For the first time, something shifted in Weston's expression, something softer. "Because on the day you threw me that gold, you did something nobody else had done in 3 years of begging. You looked at me like I was a person, not a human, not a beggar, a person. I figured, maybe that worked both ways. Maybe orcs weren't just orcs. Maybe they were people too, and maybe people who got treated like they were worthless could help each other." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where both people are thinking hard, and words would only get in the way. 20%, Scarla heard herself say. "I invest 50,000 gold. I get 20% ownership and final say on major business decisions." Weston didn't hesitate. 30%, 60,000 gold. Joint decisions on anything over 500 gold. And you come visit the workshop, see what you're investing in. Deal. The word surprised them both. Scarla had meant to negotiate more, to think it through, to do the careful analysis she applied to every business decision. But something about the way Weston looked at her, like he saw not Lady Goldtusk, the wealthy merchant, but Scarla, the person who'd once taken a risk on impulse, made careful analysis seem less important than it usually did. They shook hands. His grip was strong, calloused, real. "When can I see this workshop?" Scarla asked. "Tomorrow," Weston said. "First light. I'll wait outside your hall." After he left, Scarla sat in her office for a long time, staring at the contracts he'd left behind, wondering what exactly she'd just agreed to, wondering why her chest felt lighter than it had in months, wondering why she was already looking forward to tomorrow. The workshop was nothing like Scarla expected. She'd imagined a disaster, a charitable fantasy held together by good intentions and desperation. What she found instead was a functioning business. The building sat in the heart of the lower districts, a converted warehouse that had been empty for years. The sign above the door read Fletcher & Converters in both Common Tongue and Orcish script. Through the windows, she could see movement, hear sounds. Weston met her at the door, and for the first time since this started, he looked nervous. "It's not fancy," he said, "but it works." He wasn't wrong about fancy. The interior was rough wood and basic tools and sawdust everywhere. But it was organized, clean, in the sense that mattered. No rot, no dangerous debris, no chaos. Just work happening, and the workers. She counted 17 people, 9 humans, 8 orcs, all of them showing signs of hard living. Scars, missing fingers, limps, faces that had seen too much too young. But they were working, together. A human holding a plank steady while an orc sawed. An orc handing tools to a human. No segregation, no obvious tension. "That's Brunjar Stonefist," Weston said, pointing to a massive orc with a missing tusk and 3 parallel scars across his face. "Former pit fighter. Got injured, couldn't fight anymore. Ended up on the streets. Nobody would hire him because they said he was too violent. Turns out, he's really good at detailed carving work. Patient, careful. As if summoned, Brugnar looked up and saw Skarla. His expression went through several changes. Surprise, nervousness, something that might have been fear. He walked over, polishing his remaining tusk with his thumb in a gesture Skarla recognized. Nervous habit, common among younger orcs trying to make good impressions. Lady Goldtusk, he said, his voice rough but respectful. It's an honor. Weston told us you were the one who gave him his start. We're grateful. This place gave me back something I thought I'd lost. What's that? Skarla asked. Brugnar looked at his scarred hands, then back at her. Purpose. The feeling that I'm good for something other than hitting people. He went back to work. Skarla watched him go, feeling something uncomfortable in her throat. That's Clara, Weston said, pointing to a young human woman supervising a group of workers assembling chairs. My sister. She was working in a textile factory 12 hours a day, barely making enough to eat. Now she's my floor manager. Best one I could ask for. Clara waved, then went back to correcting an orc worker's angle on a joint. The orc listened, adjusted, nodded thanks. Natural, easy. Skarla walked through the workshop, Weston beside her, explaining processes and showing her finished products. The furniture was simple but well made, sturdy, the kind of thing that would last years with proper care. And everywhere she looked, she saw humans and orcs working together like it was the most natural thing in the world. How? She finally asked. How did you get them to work together? Orcs and humans hate each other. Do they? Weston asked. Or do rich orcs and rich humans hate each other, and everyone else just has to live with those decisions? These people, they don't have the luxury of prejudice, Lady Goldtusk. They're too busy trying to survive. I gave them a choice. Work together and eat, or stay separate and starve. Turns out, hunger is a great teacher. They ended up in Weston's office, a small room at the back with a desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered in sketches and plans. He poured them both water from a pitcher, and they sat in silence for a moment. I owe you an apology, Skarla said. Weston looked up, surprised. For what? For assuming you'd waste the money. For thinking you were just another beggar who'd take what I gave and disappear. For not seeing what you saw, that there was something more important than charity happening. You couldn't have known, Weston said. But, can I ask you something? Yes. Why did you really give me that gold? And don't say it was to prove a point to your uncle. That might have been the reason you used, but it wasn't the real reason. I saw your face before you threw it. You looked sad. Skarla was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Weston probably thought she wasn't going to answer, but something about this place, about the sounds of work happening outside, about the way he asked without judgment, made her want to be honest. I looked at you, she finally said, and I saw someone who was alone, really alone, in a way that had nothing to do with people around you. And I thought, maybe I recognize that. Maybe I threw you the gold because I wanted to believe that being alone could be fixed with money, that problems that feel unsolvable could be bought away. Can they? No, Skarla said, but apparently they can be built away. You turned my attempt at solving my own loneliness into something that actually helps people. That's impressive. Weston smiled. That same curious smile from 3 months ago. Maybe we both got what we needed. You proved you could take a risk. I proved I could build something. And now we get to find out what happens when a wealthy orc and a former beggar try to change how things work. That sounds dangerous. Probably, Weston agreed. But it also sounds interesting, and I've been poor and safe. Interesting is better. They shook hands again, and Skarla felt something she hadn't felt in years, the sense that she wasn't facing the world alone anymore. The backlash started 3 days later. Skarla was reviewing expansion plans with Weston when her assistant burst in, face pale. Lady Skarla, you need to see this. The main trading hall was packed, but not with customers, with nobles. Traditional orcs from old families, all of them looking at her with expressions ranging from disappointment to rage. And at their head, naturally, was War Chief Hoktar. Niece, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. We need to talk about your new business venture. Do we? Skarla kept her voice neutral, professional. I wasn't aware I needed family approval for my investments. You do when those investments shame the Goldtusk name, Hoktar growled. You do when you partner with humans. When you create mongrel workshops that corrupt orc tradition. When you make a mockery of everything our ancestors built. I'm making furniture, Skarla said. Not policy. You're making a statement. one of the other nobles said. Vrashka Ironheart, an old warrior matron who'd fought in 3 tribal wars and had opinions about everything. You're saying orcs and humans are equals, that we should mix, that the old ways are wrong. I'm saying, Scarla countered, that people need furniture, and 2 hands are 2 hands regardless of skin color. That caused murmurs. Scandalized, angry. We're giving you a choice, Hoktar said. End this partnership. Close the workshop. Return to proper business, or face consequences. What consequences? Trade consequences. Every orc merchant in this city will refuse to do business with you. Your supply lines will dry up. Your customers will go elsewhere. Your fortune will crumble, and the Gold Tusk name will be stricken from the clan register. You'll be exile. Alone. The word alone landed like a physical blow, because Hoktar knew exactly what he was doing. Knew that being alone was Scarla's deepest fear. Knew that for all her wealth and power, she still craved connection to her people. Scarla looked at the gathered nobles, saw the certainty in their faces. They believed they were right. Believed they were protecting tradition and strength and everything that made orcs valuable. They didn't see cruelty. They saw necessity. I need time, she said, to consider. You have 3 days, Hoktar said. Then we expect your answer. They left, all of them, sweeping out of her hall like a tide of green skin and cold judgment. Weston emerged from where he'd been watching from the upper gallery. They're going to destroy you. Yes, Scarla said. Probably. You should end the partnership, I'll understand. You have too much to lose. And what do you lose? Weston shrugged. The workshop, the dream, the idea that maybe things could be different. But I've lost things before. I'll survive. Scarla looked at him. At this human who'd taken her charity and built something meaningful, who'd given jobs to people nobody wanted, who'd looked at the wall between species and said, very politely, "Excuse me, I think I'll ignore that." "No," she said. "No? No. I'm not ending the partnership. I'm not closing the workshop. I'm not choosing fear over what's right. If they want to exile me, let them exile me. I've spent 37 years trying to earn respect from people who will never give it because I committed the crime of seeing humans as people. I'm done." "Scarla, don't," she interrupted. "Don't try to give me an easy way out. Don't try to make this about noble sacrifice. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because for the first time in years, I feel like I'm building something that matters more than money, and I'm not giving that up. Not for tradition, not for family, not for fear." Weston looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "All right then. I guess we're in this together. I guess we are." They didn't touch, didn't embrace, but something passed between them in that moment. Something that felt like the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. The consequences came fast. Within 2 days, 5 of Scarla's major suppliers canceled contracts. 3 shipping companies refused to transport her goods. The Merchant Council called an emergency session to discuss the Gold Tusk problem. Customers who'd done business with her for years suddenly had other places to be. The workshop took direct hits, too. Someone broke the windows during the night, painted Orc Trader across the front wall in red paint, left threats nailed to the door. 2 workers quit, too scared to come back. Others showed up with bruises, having been warned by strangers about working for Scarla. And then came the fire. It happened on the 4th night. Scarla was working late in her office, reviewing what was left of her business, when Clara burst in, soot-stained and terrified. "The workshop?" she gasped. "They set fire to the workshop." Scarla ran. She ran through the streets of Greyfang City, her expensive robes catching on corners, her breath burning in her chest. Ran toward the smoke column rising over the lower districts. Ran toward the orange glow that meant destruction. The workshop was engulfed. Flames poured from every window. The roof was already collapsing. And in front of the building, fighting the fire with buckets and desperation, were all 17 workers, humans and orcs together, trying to save what they'd built. Weston stood at the center, coordinating efforts, his face black with smoke and streaked with something that might have been tears or sweat, or both. When he saw Scarla, his expression crumbled. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I failed. I couldn't protect it." Scarla grabbed him, pulled him close, pressed her forehead to his in the traditional orc gesture of trust and shared burden. "You didn't fail anything. They did this, not you. What do we do?" She pulled back, looking at the burning building, at the workers still fighting despite the obvious futility, at the gathered crowd watching with expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction, at the flames consuming everything they'd built. We rebuild, she said. How? You've lost everything. Your suppliers, your customers, your fortune is crumbling, and I have nothing. The workshop was all I had. Scarla turned to face him fully, took his face in her hands. Her tusks were inches from his face, her eyes reflecting firelight, and she said the words that had been building in her chest for weeks. You asked me once why I really gave you that gold. I told you part of it, but not all of it. The truth is, I looked at you and saw someone who wasn't beaten yet, who still had fight left, who looked at me like I was worth looking at, and I wanted to see what would happen if someone like that got a chance. I wanted to see if I was right, if faith could be worth more than gold. Were you right? Yes, she said. You proved I was right, and now I'm going to prove something else. I'm going to prove that losing everything material doesn't mean you've lost what matters. We'll rebuild, not because it's smart business, not because it's safe, but because what we built here, this idea that people can work together despite history telling them they can't, that's worth more than my fortune. That's worth everything. Weston stared at her. Then, without warning, without permission, without thinking about the consequences, he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate and smoke-flavored and probably very stupid. It was two people acknowledging that somewhere between charity and business, between orc and human, between rich and poor, they'd found something neither of them had been looking for. When they pulled apart, Scarla was crying. She who never cried. She who prided herself on strength and control and never showing weakness. She cried because she'd just lost her fortune and found something infinitely more valuable. I'm terrified, Weston admitted, his forehead still pressed to hers. I don't know how to rebuild. I don't know how to fix this. Neither do I, Scarla said. But I know we're not doing it alone. Not anymore. Behind them, the workshop collapsed with a sound like breaking worlds. The workers stopped fighting, stood in stunned silence, watched their jobs, their hope, their evidence that things could be different, burn to ash. But Scarla turned to face them. All 17 of them. These broken people who'd taken a chance on an impossible idea. Tomorrow, she said, her voice carrying over the crackle of flames. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. All of us. Together. I'll sell everything I own if I have to. I'll trade my manor for lumber, my jewels for nails, my reputation for your wages. Because this, what we built here, this is more important than anything I've accumulated in 37 years of accumulation. They'll just burn it again, Brugnar said quietly. They'll keep coming after us. Then we build fireproof, Weston said, standing beside Scarla. We build in stone instead of wood. We build so strong they can't break us. And if they try, well, we've got 17 people who are very good at building things. And orcs are traditionally excellent at defense. A few people laughed. Weak laughs, exhausted laughs, but laughs nonetheless. Are you sure? Clara asked, looking at Scarla. You're really going to give up everything? For us? I already gave up everything that mattered, Scarla said. I gave up trying to earn approval from people who'd never give it. I gave up pretending that money made me less lonely. I gave up thinking that strength meant standing alone. What I'm gaining is people worth standing with. So yes, I'm sure. Old Jasper, the elderly carpenter who'd been one of the first hires, stepped forward. He was in his 70s, missing 2 fingers, bent with age and hard labor. I ain't cried in 30 years, he said, his voice rough. But I'm crying now, because I thought I'd die without seeing people like you two exist. Thank you for proving an old man wrong about how the world works. They stood there as the workshop burned. 17 workers, 1 orc noble, 1 former beggar, watching everything they'd built turn to ash, planning how to build it better. And somewhere in the crowd, unnoticed by them, Rugneth the gossip watched with wide eyes and a heart full of the best story she'd ever witnessed. Reconstruction took 4 months. 4 months of Scarla selling properties, liquidating assets, calling in every favor she'd accumulated over decades of business. 4 months of Weston working 16-hour days, teaching, building, planning. 4 months of workers showing up every morning despite threats, despite violence, despite fear. 4 months of Scarla and Weston learning how to work together, how to argue about design choices, how to compromise on business decisions, how to trust each other's expertise, how to fall in love properly, beyond desperate kisses amid flames. The romance grew like the new workshop, slowly, carefully, with strong foundations. Weston would bring her breakfast when she forgot to eat, which was often. Scarla would sit with him in the evenings, teaching him to read Orcish so he could better understand half his workers. They'd walk through the lower districts together, planning expansions, dreaming bigger than either dared alone. The first time Weston met Scarla's mother, an aging warrior matron who'd disowned her daughter officially but shown up at the construction site anyway, he expected hostility. What he got was a hard stare and a simple question. "You make her happy?" "I try," Weston said honestly. "Good. She deserves happy. Hasn't had nearly enough of it." The matron had walked away, officially maintaining her disapproval while unofficially making sure the construction crew had enough supplies. The second workshop rose in stone, larger than the first, stronger, with sleeping quarters above for workers who had nowhere else to go, with a community kitchen, with a small library of technical manuals in both languages, with a sign above the door that read, Fletcher and Goldtusk Industries. The day they reopened, the crowd was larger than expected. Workers they'd employed before, all returning. Workers they'd never met, asking for jobs. Customers from the middle districts, willing to risk association for quality furniture at fair prices, and standing at the back, watching with expressions ranging from grudging respect to outright approval, several orc merchants who'd decided that tradition mattered less than good business sense. Hoktar wasn't there. Most of the traditional nobles weren't, but their absence felt less like victory denied and more like victory that didn't need their approval. Scarla stood on the steps of the new workshop with Weston beside her, looking at everything they'd built from ash. Her fortune was a fraction of what it had been. Her social standing among traditional orcs was destroyed beyond repair. Her future was uncertain in ways that would have terrified her a year ago. She'd never been happier. "Ready?" Weston asked, offering her his hand. "For what?" "For whatever comes next. For building something that lasts. For proving that two different people from two different worlds can create something neither world expected." Scarla took his hand, felt the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip, the certainty of someone who'd survived being nothing and learned to build everything. "I've been ready my whole life," she said. "I just didn't know what I was ready for until a beggar taught me that faith costs more than gold but pays better." They opened the doors together, let the crowd pour in, watched humans and orcs mingle without violence, saw the future they'd built start to take its first real steps. That night, as they stood in their new office, twice the size of the old one, with actual chairs that fit both of them, Weston pulled something from his pocket. A golden medallion on a simple chain. "Remember the bag of gold you threw at me?" he asked. "Hard to forget. I kept one coin, had it melted down and reforged into this." He showed her both sides. One side engraved with an orc tusk and human hand clasped together, the other with simple words, where it began. "Weston, it's not for me," he said. "It's for you, because you gave me everything with that bag of gold, my future, my purpose, my chance to prove I was more than circumstances, and eventually, you. So I wanted you to have something that represented what that moment meant." Where everything began. Scarla took the medallion with shaking hands. This former beggar had taken one coin from a fortune thrown in contempt and turned it into a symbol of everything they'd built, everything they'd become. "Will you wear it?" Weston asked softly. Instead of answering, Scarla pulled him close and kissed him. Properly this time, not desperate or smoke-flavored. A kiss that said yes to the medallion, yes to their partnership, yes to whatever future they built together. When they finally pulled apart, she fastened the chain around her neck. The medallion rested just above her heart. Gold that had been charity, transformed into faith, transformed into love. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing more in me than I saw in myself, for teaching me that strength isn't standing alone. It's knowing who to stand with. Thank you for throwing a bag of gold at a beggar," Weston replied. "Best impulsive decision anyone ever made." They laughed, and somewhere in the distance, Greyfang City continued its evening routine, unaware that it was slowly changing. That workshop by workshop, worker by worker, the walls between species were being built away by people who cared more about making things than making war. 6 months later, Fletcher and Goldtusk Industries employed 47 people. They'd opened a second location. They'd started training programs for young workers of both species. They'd proven that what seemed impossible was merely difficult. And on quiet evenings, Scarla would touch the medallion at her throat and remember the day she threw away a fortune and found something infinitely more valuable. Sometimes the best investments aren't the ones you plan carefully. They're the ones you make on impulse, in anger, in a desperate attempt to prove a point. Sometimes you throw gold at a beggar and get nothing back. And sometimes you throw gold and get everything. Not because of the gold, but because of the faith. If you've stayed with us until now, you've witnessed something rare. Not just a story about orcs and humans, but a story about the moment when charity transforms into partnership, when wealth discovers its real value. When two people from impossible backgrounds find that the most dangerous thing you can give someone is the chance to prove they're more than the world says they are. Because in the end, the world didn't need perfect heroes. It needed broken people willing to build each other up. It needed wealthy orcs willing to lose everything for what matters. It needed beggars who refused to stay beggars. It needed faith that cost more than gold but paid better. And it got all of that, one bag of gold at a time. Remember, true wealth isn't counted in coins. It's counted in the people who stand with you when everything burns, in the hands that help you rebuild. In the moment you realize you're not facing the world alone anymore. Lady Scarla Goldtusk learned that the hard way. Weston Fletcher learned it in desperation, and together they built something that proved a simple truth. Sometimes the best things we create aren't built from gold. They're built from faith in each other.